Meanwhile, Prasa could have been paying salaries to 3,000 ghost employees. This was revealed in a press briefing where the board spoke of various measures to deal with irregularities surrounding the embattled agency. Acting CEO David Mphelo joins me now to unpack these measures and plans to make Prasa fully operational. And you're a part of this conversation tonight. You can let us in on your questions and your comments on 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us at Newzroom 405. Mphelo, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus.
Good evening, Tabo, to you and the viewers.
Chronic challenges, one would say, that have been undermining Prasa's ability to deliver on its mandate. Chief amongst them is the issue of security at Prasa, the safety of your employees, the safety of customers, the safety of infrastructure, triggered by and large by a decision taken by Prasa to terminate contract of the security companies, their private security companies, and of course that resulted in a huge shortage of manpower. But of course that is a story in the past. We are now talking of Prasa rebuilding that very key and important infrastructure. I mentioned earlier on that it was reported to Parliament that 17% of Prasa's network in Gauteng is functional, 47% in KZN is functional, and 40% in the Western Cape currently functional. What is the work that is being done to improve that number of functioning lines?
Perhaps let me start with the work that we've started from within going outwards. So we've looked at the organization and the operating model that we have, and we found gaps. The structure is just too deep at the moment. That's the first thing. And secondly, we also trying to match the skills that we have internally to the job at hand or the work at hand. So we need to do a skills audit so that we can then match people into the right areas and be able to be productive and efficient as well. Further to that, we've also started a project we call Ziveze. Basically, we're encouraging people to come out and show themselves. For those that know, we've got 17,000 employees. So when we go out there, we're basically saying, come forward with your identity, your qualifications, and let your manager also come and confirm that you are who you are in the system. To date, I think we only got 14,000 responses, which then says there's 3,000 out there that have not come back as yet. So we don't know whether they are not coming out because they're afraid, either because they don't have qualifications, or they are illegally registered individuals, or they are ghost employees. So there's 3,000 that's sitting out there. So that's just a start. And then second to that, we've got these governance issues that are historical with us from irregularities that we're dealing with both the AG and also the SIU. So part of what we've done to date, we've looked at the SIU report, and we've acted on the 33 individuals implicated in that report. So the internal process has started on those, part of which means either suspensions and taking them through the disciplinary processes. So I'm not going to dig further into that because that involves legal proceedings as well. But we also have got the old contracts like Swifambo as well, and that as well, we've acted on that, and people that were involved in those also are going through processes. So that's clean up from internal going outwards. What are we doing outwards, as you asked? We're recovering corridors one at a time. And the destruction in our infrastructure is not necessarily the same across all the regions. Gauteng has been affected a lot more than all the other regions if you compare. So we've got substations destroyed. In certain cases, we've got the overhead track equipment destroyed. And in certain cases, even the rail itself has been taken away. So each corridor, if you look at that, has got its own characteristics and gaps. And we're taking each corridor one at a time and looking at what we need to do to repair and bring it back. As you may have seen, we've taken Mabopane back. We've put the new train, and commuters are loving it. And to date, I think we've maintained that, we've sustained the service, and we're carrying on like that. We're targeting 3 more corridors in the Gauteng area. One is Salisville, and we're looking at Naledi in the Soweto area. We're also looking at Penarsport in the Pretoria area as well. So that should be coming soon. We should be opening that going forward. In KZN, where things that looked a little bit more stable, but affected by the maintenance and on the infrastructure, we've got the likes of Umlazi to Durban and the Kwamashi to Durban corridors that we're looking into. So we're repairing that infrastructure also to put in the new blue and grey trains there. Western Cape, as you know, we've got Central Line, which to date has come to a standstill because of encroachment. So we're looking at relocating those people. But obviously with the court that has granted us the permission to relocate them, we have to do it in a humane way. So we're not going to push people out. We have to look at alternative places to go and put them before we can just evict them. So Central Line, if you look at it, half of it is working from Cape Town to Langa area. We're also going to bring the Langa through the Pinelets portion back into Cape Town back as well. We're looking at that. We've got the Northern Line working in between Monte Vista to Belleville. We need to bring the Goodwood portion back as well. And there's the challenge in the Eastern Cape area where we're relying very much on the Transnet or TFR infrastructure there. But we should find a solution soon in that area as well, where we will have to bring the blue and grey. But that will need a lot more work. Over and above that, Mr. Mthuli, we have our capital program, which focuses on the modernization of our infrastructure, including the modernization of our rolling stock. Right. You would have seen the blue and grey trains. We took that with the MEC of Transport in Gauteng. He loved it. Yeah. We took that as well when we launched with the minister as well. What a ride, I should say. Yeah. So we've got that, and to date we've produced around 80 trains. 60 of those, or rather 59 of those are currently in the Gauteng area. 12 are currently in the Western Cape and 9 in KZN. I should hasten to say the ones that are out there in the coastal areas are still going through some testing so that we can then put them into the rail tracks and service the people accordingly. We also need to then revamp our depots, which is where we keep our rolling stock or the train sets and maintain them as well. So that we're going to modernize, and you can imagine infrastructure as old as ours, which has not been modernized or looked at or maintained. We need to then intervene and have a lot more money that we're going to inject in the modernization program in there. I'm going
to come back and talk a little bit more about your plans to refurbish, especially, I think, 39 commuter train stations around South Africa, at least this year, or maybe that number now revised to 27. But I'll go back to some of the institutional issues as well that you have raised so far. With the Prasa acting CEO David Mphelo tonight, what are your questions? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Right, with the Prasa acting CEO David Mphelo, of course, you might have seen that story, 3,000 ghost employees being paid salaries, I think, since 2020, and this is a matter that has now been discovered, as we hear from the acting CEO, through Operation Ziveze. Let's go back to that then. Question is being asked, as it is month end, were those 3,000 paid again in this particular wage roll? What has actually happened? Because they didn't come out. You don't know whether they are there, whether they are qualified, whether they are ghost, whether maybe the money is going somewhere. Did you deploy the money?
So when we launched the program, the communication to the employees was that if you don't come out within the stipulated time, you will then not be paid. And to date, those 3,000 have not come back or come out, and therefore they have not been paid. So we've stopped payment on those up until they come out. So that payroll to those individuals has not been run up until, and it'll wait up until those people have come out and show up and confirm that they are real Prasa employees.
Let's talk then about other issues. I mean, okay, you're saying, first it's just clear, there are some reports that are saying it's 44 officials implicated in wrongdoing in the SIU report. You're saying it's 33.
So it is 44 implicated, but 11 of those have since left the organization, because part of this happened over the last 6 to 8 years. So 11 of those have since left the organization. So the 33 that we're talking about are those that are currently within the employ of the entity.
Yeah. And what's going to happen with those that have left? Are there any measures to pursue them?
So we can only pursue if there are criminal offenses associated with that. But if it's just simple procedural and non-compliant stuff that we need to deal with, we cannot pursue those. And that report currently is not pointing to in the 44. It's not pointing to any criminal proceedings that should be triggered.
Talk to us then. Still, we'll stay with institutional issues. What is the thinking, right? This was highly criticized by the chair of the commission at Prasa, blocking the testimony of one of your employees who wanted to whistleblow on some of the critical contracts. I think it was Ms. Ngoye, if I'm not mistaken. And it is being reported that they literally had to now go to the CCMA so the CCMA can protect them, because Prasa is going after them, wants to punish them, taking them through disciplinary. One of the reasons was because they went and testified at the commission.
So there's a story behind the story. Let me start there. In that, when we look at who started with the whistleblowing, it was actually, as I hear it, Mr. Mphelo who started with that, and Satau. So that's what we know. Over and above that, there's the internal process that's carrying on with the two individuals that you're referring to that I wouldn't want to dig into. So I would rather we leave that and subject them to that process. And if the CCMA is the part to go, we go through that. But as far as we're concerned, there's a case to answer, and they were involved in some internal processes that they will have to use this process to go and prove otherwise. Outside that, without proving that, I think the whistleblowers in our terms were Satau and Mr. Mphelo. So if they stand up and say they were whistleblowers, well, let's get through the process and see who are the real whistleblowers in this case. But we've got paperwork and we've got an internal process that we need to manage and take them through.
Yeah. No concern that maybe to other staff, the perspective, or at least the impression that is being created is that, well, you go and whistleblow at Prasa, you might end up actually being disciplined.
It's not really the case, because even if you look at the internal process, this is not the only one. We go through internal audits and forensic audits a number of times, and people continue to do that. And we encourage actually our own employees, including the public, to whistleblow. And if there are matters that are really real and are worth pursuing, we'll do so as well within the processes in the ambits of the law, and also internal processes as well. So we do support whistleblowing. We've got our own internal mechanisms for whistleblowing. It's not necessarily you go outside, but you also have the entities out there that are meant to carry this type of whistleblowing. And we do encourage individuals that have got information to do that. And we will support whistleblowing accordingly as well.
All right. Let's get back then to the other issues that you raised. 28 billion rands in irregular spending reported last year by the AG. How do you qualify that irregular expenditure?
So that 28 billion was over time. So as we went through the audits, I think a number of years, it's accumulated to the 28 billion. What have we done about that to date? We've taken, I think, around 13 billion of that through a condonation process, which is currently sitting with the National Treasury in the condonation process. So we await for the approval for that. We're also then looking at the balance of that, of those irregular expenditures as well, and taking through the process of loss control, determining whether there are criminal proceedings that need to be taken, and over and above that, then take it through to the board for signature, and then take it to National Treasury for condonation if it's worth taking that way. So there's a process that we have to follow for that. So we're taking the balance of that 28 through that process as well. But so far, 13 billion has been taken through the system, and we are waiting for that approval.
Yeah. And how far are you in recouping some of the funds for Shofambo, which is one of the contracts you mentioned? It's reported that you were in the process of at least recovering 2.5 billion of the 3 billion contract, and the service provider was pleading poverty, saying, no, we don't have that money. Are you able to recoup that money?
So there's a longer story than that on that matter. In that, Swifambo initially was liquidated, so we needed to recover the money from a liquidated entity, and we went through the process. And when we look at what we did just in the beginning, it was not worth going down that road because we were losing money. As an example, I mean, a train that we buy for 65 million, we auctioned it for 13 million. That's not the way to spend public money. So we're currently considering going into a commercial agreement with the manufacturer to see if we can then utilize the money that's currently paid to that manufacturer accordingly, and then get the benefit for both Prasa and the commuters in South Africa and the public in South Africa. So the 1.8 billion has been passed to the manufacturer, and we're busy at the moment assessing on how we better utilize that 1.8 and still get the benefit and get the trains out of that. There's a process, including a legal process and a court process, and also an approval process through National Treasury that we need to go through. But should that come out as a commercial agreement and allowed through law and also approval through National Treasury, it will be a benefit to the public, and that's a process that we're taking through instead of losing the entire 2.6 billion.
Yeah. Let's get then to the operational issues very slowly. I know that there are a number of projects here, and they're a little bit everywhere. If you don't understand, you can really get confused, and it could seem as if there's some work that's being done while there's a whole lot of other work that is really not clear as to what is happening. So 46 rail corridors, I believe, is what Prasa has, and only 20 of those are operational. And out of those 20, most of them actually running limited service, a fraction of the usual schedule that they should be running, and most of them are also running diesel as opposed to the electrical because of the infrastructure. Is that correct so far?
You've got it correct. That's the picture. So what we're doing now is looking at the low-hanging fruits and also looking at where the bigger traffic in terms of number of commuters is going to come from. So for those corridors that have the least vandalism or theft or destruction of infrastructure, we're looking at how quick we can then bring that back. And where rail existed but no electrical infrastructure, we ran the diesel, which is a limited service based on the price of diesel, or rather the costs that we incur because of the diesel operation. So that as well, we're looking at that as low-hanging fruit. We're targeting some of those, as I mentioned before, the likes of Pinasport, Naledi, where we're running diesel, and also the Lirala corridor where we're running diesel. We're looking at putting electrical infrastructure. We will then run the most efficient, newer technologies of our new trains that we're producing out in Danota, in the East Rand, and it will be a lot cheaper. So we're looking at that. So we need to move away from diesel into electrical. Yeah. As I said again,
give us a sense in kilometer terms, in Gauteng alone, how much cabling, electrical infrastructure, at least on the overhang, that you would need to be replacing right now?
Sure. So if I was to give you in kilometer at the moment, I think I'll give you a wrong number off on top of my head. But I can give you a number of these corridors, the long corridors. If you look at the Midway Soweto line right up until Vereeniging, so that's been destroyed. Naledi, New Canada to Joburg, that has been destroyed. The Lirala Tembisa line has been destroyed. The Davidton line has been destroyed all the way to Jamestown. That has been destroyed. There is part of the Salisville component that's also taken away, and I mentioned Pinasport as well. So Just on top of my head, those are the number of corridors that currently do not have the overhead track equipment or the lines, the cables.
But by destroyed, you mean people stole the copper, right?
So they've taken the copper. In certain cases, they've also destroyed the substations, the feeders of power into those lines as well. Over and above that, the stations as well, there are those whose roofs have been taken. There are those whose bricks also have been taken. They've dug the cable off the ground in some of those and destroyed. But there are also those that are standing. I must also mention that there are parts where the communities have taken this on their own and say it's not going to happen while they're looking, and those have been saved. If you go and look into Langlaagte at the moment, you'll find a very stable, still clean, intact stations, because the communities around there actually took that and said, we'll own this and there's no way they'll allow vandals to take over.
We'll take a break and come back a little bit more on the state of the operations now at Prasa, and looking at some of the refurbishment work that is being done. Prasa Acting CEO David Mphelo stays with us, and we take your views tonight. 072-110-5584. Tweet us at Newzroom 405. We're back in a moment. Back with you tonight on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. The state of Prasa under the spotlight tonight. 072-110-5584 is the number to dial with your questions and comments for the acting CEO at Prasa, David Mphelo. Before the break, he was explaining the extent of the electrical infrastructure that needs to be refurbished and reintroduced into the system. What is the current patronage per day that you're looking at?
Oh, so on that, I've just looked at what we're doing in Mawabane since we reintroduced the line. And because of the number of stations that we're running in that environment, the numbers are still low. And we're still going to revitalize some of those stations and put them back. And when we get what we refer to as the home stations, you'll start seeing the numbers going up. We're seeing around 2,000 a day in that environment. You look at KwaZulu-Natal, the numbers have gone down pretty much because of the number of train sets that we have, and that's part of the reasons why we have to accelerate the refurbishment of our yellow and grey trains. But overall, if I just compare to where the numbers were in the metro rail environment from 2008 to 2020, it was around 650 million a year. It's now gone down to around 147 million a year. So we're looking at ramping that up as we introduce new corridors and new train sets. And obviously with the newer technology, when we introduce the better signaling technology, and we shorten the headways between the trains, we're going to see a lot more of those numbers going back. So I've just given you a history in terms of where we are around through 2008 and 2020. At the end of 2020, when we look at the numbers, gone down drastically. So we need to take those numbers back. But we do see also a drop in the Shosholoza Mail area as well. The numbers have gone down as well in that area. And as you may know, we also access the Transnet line, who are also experiencing a huge problem around theft and vandalism. So it affects both of us because we use that network to access. So that part of the business is affected. Then there's the unpacks business as well, which is your bus environment. So that number, at least, is not quite a huge drop like the other divisions. From 2.6 million to around 1.6 million, that's the gap that we're seeing. And that again, is between 2008 and 2020. We're yet to go and look at what we're doing at the moment. As soon as we finish this year, we'll look into those numbers accordingly.
Let's talk about that vandalism and theft. In fact, about, where was this? About at 11 this morning, the minister tweeted, "Scrap metal, biggest intervention unfolding." And people are saying, well, too little, too late. You're now going to go after the scrap metal businesses after the fact. The railway station has already been stolen. The copper cables are already gone. I mean, is there something a little bit more fixed that can be done as far as the laws that govern that space?
So let me start by saying, by the way, cable theft is not a South African problem. It's a global problem. But when we compare ourselves to the rest of the world on that problem, it's all about how you respond to that problem. There are countries where there are harsher laws when it comes to that, and perhaps we need to follow suit. You've seen what Kenya has come up with. Is that the right direction for us? It's a question that we need to look into. But one thing that we know works at the moment is the collaboration that we have with other state entities, the police, the intelligence. We now need to look at the army as well, because when we look at the type of people that are getting into our infrastructure, sometimes they're heavily armed, and we need to then respond accordingly. So we need to bring in the army as a force multiplier into our environment. Security, we've got an integrated security plan that we've introduced. It's showing some fruits, and it's part of that, what you've seen with the minister tweeting there and the minister on site is because of what we're doing, again, jointly and in collaboration with the other institutions.
Let's talk about the refurbishment then, the planned digitization, technology being introduced and so on and so forth. One of the planned projects, for the majority of them, are prioritizing Gauteng, but there are three in particular that we're talking about here that have been prioritized: Greenview, Philippi, as well as Oakmore, at least for this particular year. It is the chairperson himself who said the challenge with these particular projects are that they are regionalized as opposed to being made a national project. And he says there are challenges with skills at regional levels to be able to carry out these projects at record time. What are you doing to improve that situation?
So let me, on the station front, there's a lot more work to be done. Maybe to give you a headline figure, we've got around 115 stations that are non-functional out of 236. Within those, there are smaller stations, there are medium-sized stations, there are also bigger stations. So in the bigger station side, we're then looking at the modernization. You would have seen when we launched Mabopane. Mabopane itself has been identified as a modernization candidate. The likes of Greenview, the likes of Philippi and Oakmore that we're looking at, those are the big developments and modernization candidates. But we still have the smaller stations where we need to revitalize and recover them. As I said earlier on, some of them have been taken to the ground and others are recoverable by simply putting the roofs there. So when we look at the stations, we look at the modernization candidates for more business and developments. We also look at the stations just simply for access for our commuters in and out scenario. You talk about the technology and digitization. There are those where we're going to bring the likes of Wi-Fi and improve the experience of our commuters, the experience of our own traders, and the connectivity thereof and the access in and out of the trains as well. So we've got to look at that in that manner, and we've assessed and we've done some work with a quantity surveyor to look at what needs to be done. And we're bringing in different type of programs to address that. And one of those is looking at the simpler and the quickest way of recovering some of the stations, which includes the container business. That has been done elsewhere in the world. We look at the likes of Netherlands, they've done that, and it's all beautiful. And we may look at other technologies on the other stations as well. So we've got 115 non-functional. We need to look at what stage, what type of stations, and also identify which type of response in terms of the programs we have to put into there to recover them. But the quicker we recover them, I think the better for our commuters to get in and out of the train service.
So then there are two parts to this. There's the need to protect the existing infrastructure so that it doesn't get vandalized and it deteriorates further. And as you invest and as you build, you need to then ensure that you protect those. And there are two components to it. One, you deploy technology. And two, you also deploy human resource actually on the ground. The last recruitment I saw was 3,100 security staff. Is that enough?
So 3,100 is definitely not enough. To give you a picture, I'm made to believe that long before my time, when we were protecting our infrastructure properly, we had around 9,000 to 10,000 security bodies. When we stopped it, we took that number down to 2,000. We had to quickly ramp it up by this 3,100 that you hear. But we also need to complement that with private security, which is what we're doing. Once we've got that, the boots on the ground, we then need to bring in technologies to improve the efficiencies. Because a human being can only cover so much, they can only respond to so much. But technology has also shown that it can better the security and also the response or the reaction time before infrastructure is destroyed. If you go around the world in airports, you'll find technologies that pick up bags that have been put in places that they're not supposed to be, or items that have been taken away. The camera picks that up if you use the camera scenario. But that, together with drones and sensors, all that technology, we need to combine that to bring our security into a manner and the stage where we can protect our infrastructure and also respond quickly should there be cases of vandalism or theft.
Let's then talk about the other issues, particularly when it comes to the protection of your employees, but also the protection of the customers. Let's maybe start with the customer safety. One of the big issues is around signaling. There's been a whole lot of work that is being done from some of the reports that I've listened to in Gauteng in particular to improve the signaling infrastructure. In the Western Cape, not a lot of movement because of course, the legal challenges that you're still dealing with there. What's happening in KZN? That particular project seemingly was slow to take off.
So there's a huge investment that's coming there, Mr. Mphelo, on the signaling part. The funny part is that the signaling is one of those areas where people don't see, you can't see and touch it. It's only the engineers that will know. But when you experience the service, you will then know that the signaling either is broken, is working, or is not working. But we're investing around 14 billion rands in the signaling space. We're out to source the services through the service providers on that, and half of that, actually more than half of that, is going to go into the KZN area.
And currently, I mean, in Gauteng, there's a reporting, I think, if I'm correct, I remember very well, around 63 or 69% completed the work at the time. This was probably late last year. Where is it sitting now?
So the Gauteng project started when we signaled, and then we went through vandalism. So where we put in signaling, the vandalists went in and took out some components. So we're going through the re-signaling in there. It will have improved from that 63%. We're getting into numbers above 80%. But obviously, with the corridors that I read out that are still exposed, we still need to do signaling in there. The bigger part of that is destruction of what we had put in place before. We now need to go back and re-signal that, which means spending a lot more than what we anticipated.
The securing then of your employees. I mean, we've seen some horrific incidences of, for example, train drivers being attacked and so on and so forth. How are you approaching that?
So part of this integrated security plan that we have, we have to have onboard security in the trains that will protect both commuters and also our staff. We also have got the police that are dedicated into assisting us with the securities in our infrastructure, and both on board as well. So we have that, and the more people we put in the boots on the ground, the more we'll secure our people, the more we'll secure our employees as well. Yeah. So there shouldn't be a train that runs without either police or our own security on board.
And finally, you mentioned them earlier as well, unpacks. So as part of the turnaround, one is to bring back the customers, two is to generate revenue, but three is to focus on sustainability. And now your predecessor was saying that maybe there needs to be a rethink, maybe a new conversation around unpacks and whether or not, as part of the sustainability of Prasa, it still fits within the outfit. If you look at the areas we need to cover, it's no doubt that it still fits within the transport space. It still fits. There are good corridors where we can operate our buses. One of the things that we looked at in terms of going forward is, do we divisionalize or we keep unpacks as a subsidiary? So we looked into that. We now need to look at the sustainability, and we put a business plan, a robust business plan that talks about recovering unpacks, and we're taking it through the approval process. But we do also need to look at partnering, and there are people out there that want to get into this, and we're also exploring into finding strategic partners for unpacks. CEO, appreciate your time, and thank you very much for that intervention and highlighting some of those big projects that you're dealing with in turning around Prasa. We thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for having me. Thank you.